In tonight's headlines, the Court of Final Appeal upholds rulings in favor of equal housing and inheritance rights for same-sex couples. The government reviews a development plan for the city's creative industries, pledging to make the city an international cultural exchange center. And U.S. President-elect Donald Trump claims he'll sign an executive order to impose extra tariffs on all Chinese imports on the very first day he takes office.
In a landmark ruling, Hong Kong's top court has granted same-sex couples in the city equal rights to public housing and inheritance by unanimously dismissing the government's appeals seeking to preserve its housing policies and intestacy laws. The decision by the Court of Final Appeal also concludes a 6-year legal battle initiated by Nick Ainfinger, who challenged the exclusion of him and his partner from public rental housing on the grounds they were not an ordinary family. His case was combined with that of Henry Lee and his late husband, Edgar Ng, who contested policies that denied same-sex couples subsidized housing and inheritance rights. In today's ruling, the court emphasized that overseas same-sex marriages must be treated equally to heterosexual marriages under Hong Kong law. Differentiating between same-sex and heterosexual couples in housing applications constitutes unjustified discrimination, violating their right to equality under the Basic Law. Moreover, public housing and subsidized housing aims to serve the needs for vulnerable groups, not to promote population growth. Regarding inheritance rights, the court rejected claims from the Department of Justice that only heterosexual couples have spousal support obligations, affirming that both types of couples are legally comparable. In response, a government spokesman said, "The government respects the court's decision and will study the judgment thoroughly, while seeking legal advice from the Department of Justice for appropriate follow-up actions." Holding a rainbow flag outside the court, Ainfinger said, "The ruling acknowledges same-sex couples' rights to love and live together, but for additional rights, more time and effort are needed." Advocacy group Hong Kong Marriage Equality applauded the rulings and urged the government to expedite the creation of a legal framework for recognizing same-sex relationships, as mandated by the court last year. Quentin Yap, Cable News. After taking an extra year for drafting, the government today unveiled the much-anticipated development blueprint for Hong Kong's creative and cultural sectors, aiming to establish the SAR as an East meets West Center for cultural exchange. The blueprint for arts and culture and creative industries development, originally set to launch last year, outlines 4 key directions: promoting Chinese culture, developing diverse creative industries, enhancing art exchanges, and strengthening the city's arts and cultural ecosystem. Specifically, 71 measures are listed out to boost the city's cultural influence through improved infrastructure and platforms. For instance, the blueprint plans to enhance local museum system to attract tourists and to build a new museum in the northern metropolis, highlighting the country's developmental achievements. Additionally, a Chinese Culture Experience Center is set to be established in historic Kowloon Park, with construction slated to begin next year. More noteworthily, the funding mechanism for local arts groups will undergo a comprehensive review to ensure the effective use of public resources and taxpayers' money, according to Culture, Sports and Tourism Minister Kevin Yeung. Authorities will adopt key performance indicators as part of their assessment criteria. Art groups with good performances can be included in our funding scheme, while those consistently underperform to see their funding reduced, said Kenneth Fogg, chairman of the Arts Development Council. Kevin Yeung assured that the blueprint is intended as a macro policy document that is not cast in stone, meaning further adjustments will be made as circumstances evolve. Quentin Yap, Cable News.
Trade wars seem imminent once U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office in January. Implementing his campaign promises, Trump pledged big tariffs on the country's 3 largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China. Trump outlined in a social media post that on Inauguration Day, he would sign an executive order imposing a 25% tariff on all products coming into the U.S. from Mexico and Canada, an additional 10% tariff above any existing tariffs on China. He explained the new tariffs are needed because of the three countries' failure to curb the number of drugs, in particular fentanyl, entering the U.S., as well as migrants crossing the border from Canada and Mexico illegally. China responded that no one will win a trade war and said it had taken steps to combat drug trafficking after an agreement was reached last year between the U.S. and Chinese leaders. Meanwhile, Canada said it places the highest priority on border security, adding that the border agencies work together every single day to disrupt the scourge of fentanyl coming from China and other countries. More than 83% of exports from Mexico went to the U.S. in 2023, and 75% of Canadian exports go to the country. The tariffs potentially spell trouble for overseas companies like the many Asian auto and electronics manufacturers that use Mexico as a low-cost production gateway for the U.S. market. Trump's threatened new tariffs would also appear to violate the terms of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Deal, threatening global trade. Anna Chan, Cable News.
Businesses in the city are already looking out for new opportunities in different markets after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump vowed to impose an extra 10% tariffs on Chinese goods. Peter Lam, chairman of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, said the additional tariffs would not benefit business on both sides, as the U.S. inflation will worsen due to the tariffs burden. Lam highlighted China's vast consumer base of 1.4 billion people as a critical market that Hong Kong can leverage to attract foreign investments into the mainland. Meanwhile, President of the Chinese Manufacturers Association Winkle Lo said, while the U.S. and European markets remain significant, accounting for a substantial share of the city's trade, companies are already exploring new markets to mitigate potential impacts of the tariff hike. Emerging markets such as Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and even Africa are being eyed for future business opportunities, Lo added. Hong Kong's exports and imports both grew for 8 consecutive months in October. October's exports rose to $393 billion, up 3.5% over a year ago, slower than September's 4.7% increase, while imports climbed 4.5% to $424 billion in October, marking a significant improvement from last month's 1.4% rise, resulting in the trade deficit narrowing to $31 billion, down from $53.2 billion in the previous month. By region, exports to the mainland gained 8.6%, a slowdown from last month's 12.3%. Exports to the U.S. rebounded 5.8% after declining 2.3% in September. For the first 10 months of the year, the city's exports grew by 9.9% over the same period last year, while imports rose 6.8%, accounting for a trade deficit of $301.7 billion. Looking ahead, the government said the increased global economic uncertainties and the possible escalation of trade conflicts would pose challenges to Hong Kong's export performance, hoping the stimulus measures by the mainland could support exports demand from the city. Chief Secretary Eric Chan highlighted the potential for high-level collaboration between Hong Kong and Foshan during his second day of a 3-day visit with a delegation to mainland cities in the Greater Bay Area. Speaking at the Foshan Hong Kong Economic and Trade Cooperation Conference, Chen said Foshan has a robust manufacturing base with a complete industrial chain, while Hong Kong has rich experience in business, logistics, and management. The cooperation between both cities could enhance industrial synergy and facilitate efficient flow of resources, further promoting collaborative development across the Greater Bay Area, he added. Currently, there are over 4,000 Hong Kong enterprises operating in Foshan, with more than 10% newly established this year. In the first 10 months of the year, 291 Foshan companies have invested $2.12 billion in Hong Kong.
特首跟我谈到，
Meanwhile, Secretary of the Communist Party of China Foshan Municipal Committee Tang Yifeng cited Chief Executive Zhang Li's words yesterday at Foshan's Lingnan Tiandi, saying that the collaboration between the two cities is like running a race, where combining the speed of one runner with the endurance of another can yield remarkable results. The delegation later moved on to Guangzhou and Dongguan, where they visited some local districts' development and hoped to bring back the experience to the northern metropolis. The delegation will visit Huizhou and Shenzhen tomorrow before concluding the trip. Evelyn Bai, Cable News.
Despite growing hope of a ceasefire deal in Lebanon, Israeli military continued its missile strikes in Beirut's southern suburbs after issuing evacuation warnings. The Israeli cabinet will vote on a 60-day ceasefire deal with Hezbollah today, and sources said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had approved the plan in principle. Under the US-backed proposal, the Israeli military would withdraw entirely from southern Lebanon, while Hezbollah would pull its heavy weapons about 25 kilometers north of the Israeli border. The Lebanon's army would move in to provide security in the border zone alongside an existing United Nations peacekeeping force during an initial 60-day transition phase, while the US would lead a 5-country international monitoring committee that would act as a referee on infringements. Israeli government spokesperson said the agreement with Lebanon will enable the safe return of Israeli residents to their homes, also maintain Israel's freedom of operation to act in defense to remove Hezbollah threat. Lebanon's foreign minister said hopefully the ceasefire process will lead to negotiations with Israel to delineate land border. He hoped the truce deal would be agreed later today. Israeli troops began a land invasion of Lebanon almost 2 months ago. More than 3,000 people have been killed in Lebanon since then. A quarter of the population has been displaced. Tens of thousands of Israelis who were evacuated from the border months ago are pressuring the government to let them return home. Anna Chen, Cable News.
The government launched its second batch of retail infrastructure bond today, offering a minimum interest rate of 3.5%. As part of the infrastructure bond program, the latest launch aims to raise up to $20 billion, with the possibility of increasing the total issuance to $25 billion, depending on investors' demand. Available for subscription from today to December 6th, and to be listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange on December the 17th, the bond will be sold in lots priced at $10,000, with a tenor of 3 years. A maximum allocation of $1 million per investor will be stipulated, meaning that each investor will be allocated 100 lots at most. Interest rate is linked to the city's inflation, but guaranteed at a minimum of 3.5%. Payments will be made semi-annually. The proceeds from this bond will be allocated to the Capital Works Reserve Fund, earmarked for future infrastructure projects.